As an executive, if you fail to correctly diagnose the life cycle phase of your company, you will not survive the C suite. Today, we will learn to do that. Hi, I'm Vardan, and you're watching the Vardan Ter-Antonyan Show. Let's go.
Welcome to the Vardan Ter-Antonyan Show. We're sitting down with authors, speakers, entrepreneurs, executives, and industry leaders to talk about business, leadership, and strategy. In a world where competition is ruthless, information is power, and decisions move markets, this is where leaders learn how to win. Let's get into it.
Most executives understand strategy. Far fewer understand timing. They can articulate vision, diagnose problems, and design plans that make sense on paper. Yet many still fail, not because their thinking is flawed, but because it is applied to the wrong moment in the organization's life. This is the quiet truth that rarely appears in leadership books or even MBA programs. The same decision can be brilliant in one phase of a company's life and catastrophic in another. Context does not merely shape strategy. It determines whether strategy is legible, tolerable, or even survivable. Life cycle thinking is the discipline of understanding what kind of company you're leading right now, not the company you wish you were leading. It is ability to distinguish between building, scaling, defending, and surviving, and to adjust leadership behavior accordingly. Executives who fail to do this are often removed not because they're incompetent, but because they're temporarily misaligned. Strategy assumes choice, yet the life cycle constrains it. Most strategic frameworks begin with the assumption that the organization has the freedom to choose among options. In reality, companies are often constrained by where they are in their life cycle. Capital structure, market position, operational maturity, and external pressures narrow the range of viable moves. An executive who proposes the right strategy at the wrong time is not seen as visionary. They're seen as out of touch. This is why boards often replace leaders who appear capable. The issue is not intelligence or effort. It is misalignment between leadership behavior and organizational phase. While real organizations are messier than any model, most companies cycle sometimes repeatedly through four dominant phases. Those are build, scale, defend, and survive. These phases are not moral categories, and none is superior. Each demands different behaviors, tolerates different risks, and punishes different mistakes. The fatal error executives make is assuming that excellence in one phase translates naturally into another. It rarely does. Let's go into the build phase. It's the phase when vision matters more than discipline. The build phase is defined by creation. The organization is bringing something into existence that did not previously exist. Often a product, a market, or a business model. In this phase, ambiguity is unavoidable. Information is incomplete. Decisions are made with limited data and high conviction. Leadership in the build phase is about articulating a compelling narrative, making irreversible decisions quickly, attracting talent and capital and creating momentum in the absence of proof. Executives who thrive here are comfortable with uncertainty and rely on intuition, pattern recognition, and speed. They accept risk as prerequisite for existence. Mistakes are frequent and often forgiven. What is not forgiven is hesitation. One of the most common errors in the build phase is importing mature company practices too early. Executives with enterprise background often push for formal governance, rigid planning cycles, executive analysis, and premature optimization. These practices feel responsible, but in the build phase, they're lethal. Early organizations do not fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they run out of time, cash, and belief. Overstructuring slows learning. Overanalysis delays commitment. Overgovernance diffuses accountability. In the build phase, speed is not reckless, it's survival. Executives who excel in the build phase often internalize the belief that their instincts are universally correct. They're rewarded for boldness, decisiveness, and personal authority. This creates a dangerous blind spot when the organization begins to mature. Behaviors that once created momentum can later create fragility. Vision can turn into rigidity, speed can turn into chaos, and personal authority can undermine emerging systems. Build phase leaders who cannot evolve often become obstacles to the next phase. The next phase is scale, when systems replace heroics. The scale phase begins when demand outpaces the organization's ability to deliver consistently. The product works, the market responds, and growth accelerates. What was once optional becomes necessary. Repeatability, reliability, and coordination. In this phase, the organization no longer needs constant reinvention. It needs consistency. Leadership shifts from creation to design. The job is no longer to solve problems personally, but to build systems that solve problems without constant intervention. Executives who thrive in the scale phase are builders of infrastructure, such as processes, teams, decision frameworks, and cultural norms. The goal is to not speed at all costs, but controlled velocity. Scaling is where many successful leaders begin to struggle, not because the work is harder, but because it is different. Executives who were once indispensable now need to make themselves replaceable. Leaders who once acted on instinct must now justify decisions with logic. And founders who once knew everything must now trust others to know more. This feels like loss, which is why many executives resist scaling, not um, consciously, but emotionally. They insert themselves into decisions that should be delegated, bypass systems, and reward heroics instead of reliability. The organization grows in spite of them until it cannot anymore. Failure to scale properly rarely produces immediate collapse. Instead, it creates hidden debt. Operational debt accumulates as fragile processes strain under volume. Eventually, growth stalls, quality declines, customers churn, and employees burn out. At this point, the organization often seeks new leadership, not because the original leaders were bad, but because they were no longer the right leaders for the phase. So now we go into defend. Let's say you scaled up your company, or processes properly and everything, and now the game shifts to protection. The defense phase begins when growth slows and competition intensifies. The organization has something worth protecting, such as market share, margins, brand, or legitimacy. The primary threat is no longer irrelevance, but erosion. In this phase, leadership priorities shift dramatically. Innovation does not disappear, it becomes selective. Risk tolerance drops. Governance tightens. Efficiency and predictability matters more than the experimentation. And the goal is not excitement, but more durability. Executives who thrive here are stewards who protect margins, manage risk, preserve trust with stakeholders, and optimize rather than reinvent. Defense phase leadership is frequently criticized as conservative or uninspired. This type of thinking misunderstands the mandate. In this phase, reckless innovation can destroy value faster than stagnation. A single mishap can undermine years of credibility. The cost of error is very high. The tolerance for volatility is low. Executives who attempt to behave like builders in a defense phase often trigger alarms. Boards interpret boldness as risk, not vision, and employees experience constant change as instability. This is why boards often replace visionary leaders with operators as companies mature and organizations' needs have changed. But defending can become pathological. Organizations that remain in defend form too long begin to calcify. Processes stop adapting, talent stagnates, and innovation becomes performative rather than substantive. Executives who excel at defense may resist acknowledging when the environment has shifted again. They mistake caution for prudence and preservation for strategy. Eventually, the organization becomes vulnerable, not to competitors, but to irrelevance. Now we go into survive mode when truth finally matters. The survive phase is triggered by the existential threat. Revenue collapses, cash runs out, regulatory or legal crises emerge, market shifts render the core business obsolete, and the organization is no longer optimizing. It is fighting for existence. In this phase, many illusions fall away. Narratives simplify. Politics recede. Truth becomes valuable again, not because leaders suddenly become virtuous, but because denial is no longer affordable. Executives who thrive in survival are brutally honest. They make unpopular decisions quickly. They cut deeply and abandon sacred cows. The goal is not growth or elegance, but continuity. Phases reveal who actually understands the business. Complex strategies collapse into fundamentals such as cash flow, customer retention, and cost structure. Executives who relied on abstraction struggle. Those who understand mechanics rise. This is also the phase where boards intervene most aggressively. Authority recentralizes, decision making accelerates, and accountability becomes ruthless. Executives who confuse survival with defense or defense with scaling often fail catastrophically. One of the most dangerous pattern in executive leadership is phase denial. Executives who lead the company they wish they had, not the one they do. Builders continue building. When the organization needs scaling, scalers optimize when the market demands reinvention. The defenders protect when survival requires radical change. Denial is understandable. Each phase rewards different identities, and letting go of a phase feels like letting go of a relevance. But organizations pay the price. Most executives' failures do not occur within a phase. They occur during transitions. The shift from build to scale, from scale to defend, from defend to survive. These moments require executives to abandon familiar strengths, learn new behaviors quickly, relinquish control, and accept different measures of success. Many cannot or will not do this. Boards interpret resistance as incapacity. Executives experience replacement as betrayal. And the truth is usually structural. The um, the role changes faster than the leader did. One of the most important career decisions an aspiring CXO can make is actually choosing roles based on life cycle fit, not title or compensation. Some executives are builders, others are scalers, some are defenders, a few are crisis leaders, but none is superior. They're different. Executives who chase prestige without regard for phase often find themselves miscast, frustrated, and eventually removed. Those who understand their strengths and the organization's moment build stronger, more durable careers. Life cycle awareness is not taught in MBA programs or emphasized in leadership development books. It is learned painfully, often too late. Yet it may be the single most important meta skill an executive can develop. It requires intellectual humanity, situational awareness, willingness to change identity, and courage to exist when fit disappears. Executives who develop this skill stop asking, "Am I good enough?" and start asking, "Is this the right moment for me?" That question changes everything. So, diagnosing the moment. What phase are you in? Most executives do not fail because they lack insight. They fail because they misdiagnose the moment. They believe the company is building when it's already scaling. They believe it's in scaling when it's quietly defending. They push innovation when survival demands consolidation. They cut deeply when the organization still has room to adapt. These errors are rarely obvious in real time. In fact, they are often applauded right up until they become undeniable. Life cycle failures is not loud at first. It's subtle. It manifests as friction, resistance, unexplained pushbacks, stalled initiatives, and sudden loss of confidence from above. By the time the phase misalignment becomes explicit, trust has already eroded. Executives rarely misdiagnose life cycles because they're careless. They misdiagnose it because signals conflict. Revenue may still be growing while margins shrink. Headcount may be increasing while execution slows. Customers may appear loyal while quietly exploring alternatives. Boards may talk about transformation while behaving defensively. If a CEO is looking at a chart where the net revenue grows from year to year, and that's all he looks at, and he sees it and he's happy, is short-sighted because he needs to look at other metrics in order to understand what else is going on in the company. Accurate diagnosis requires executives to step outside both metrics and ego. One of the most common and misleading questions executives ask is, what stage are we in? This question implies a static answer. It assumes the organization occupies a single stable phase. A more useful question is this: where is pressure coming from right now? Lifecycle phase is less about labels and more about dominant constraints. What is limiting progress? What is the system optimizing for? What does leadership fear losing most? The answers to these questions reveal far more than growth curves or headcount charts. So we're going to learn how to diagnose the life cycle phase. Diagnosis lens one: what gets funded versus what does not. Organizations are excellent at saying one thing and doing another. Executives often hear about growth, innovation, and long term vision. They attend meetings filled with aspirational rhetoric and strategic decks that emphasize opportunities. Then budgets are finalized. Life cycle reality shows up not in what is discussed, but what is funded. Build phase organizations fund experimentation, even when it fails. Scale phase organizations fund systems, infrastructure, and repeatability. Defend phase organizations fund efficiency, controls, and risk mitigation. Survival phase organizations fund only what preserves cash and continuity. In innovation, if innovation is praised but unfunded, the company is not building. If growth is discussed but constrained by controls, the company is defending. If transformation is promised but every initiative is starved, survival may already be underway. Executives who learn to read budgets instead of language diagnose reality faster. Diagnosis lens two: how mistakes are treated. Nothing reveals a life cycle phase more clearly than how an organization responds to mistakes. In the build phase, mistakes are tolerated, even expected. Failure is framed as experimentation. In the scale phase, mistakes are tolerated selectively. Errors that disrupt consistency are scrutinized. Learning must be systematized. In the defend phase, mistakes become reputational. Leaders ask not only what happened, but also why controls failed. Accountability tightens. In the survival mode, mistakes are fatal. There is no narrative cushioning. Errors trigger immediate consequences. Executives who misread this signal often behave inappropriately, taking risks when tolerance has evaporated, or playing safe when experimentation is still required. Diagnosis lens three: decision velocity. Decision speed is not a function of intelligence, it is a function of risk tolerance. Build phase organizations decide quickly because delays are more dangerous than errors. Scale phase organizations slow down to protect consistency. Defense phase organizations slow further to manage exposure. Survival phase organizations suddenly accelerate really fast again because delays become lethal. Executives often misinterpret slow decisions as incompetence or politics, and sometimes they are, but more often they reflect a legitimate fear of unintended consequences. When decisions slow and stay slow, the organization is usually no longer building, regardless of what leaders say. Now, Diagnosis lens 4. Who has veto power? In every organization, a small number of actors can stop initiatives without proposing alternatives. Those individuals or functions define the true center of gravity. In build phase, veto power concentrates around founders or vision holders. In scale phase, veto power migrates to operations, finance, and risk. In defense phase, veto power expands into legal, compliance, and reputation becomes dominant. In survival phase, veto power collapses back to the tight core, often the board and small executive group. Diagnosis lens 5. What the board asks when things go wrong. Boards reveal their priorities in crisis, not in planning sessions. When performance dips or risk surfaces, listen carefully to the questions. How fast can we recover? If that question is asked, then you're most likely in the build or scale phase. Why didn't controls catch this? When that question is asked, you're most likely in a defense phase. But if they say, how long can we survive this? You're obviously in a survival phase. Boards rarely articulate life cycles explicitly, but their questions expose it. Executives who answer the wrong questions, even with excellent analysis, lose credibility. Diagnosis lens 6. Talent behaviors, not talent statements. Organizations say they value talent. What matters is how talent behaves. In build phases, high performers tolerate chaos. They accept ambiguity in exchange for opportunity. Turnover is often voluntary and strategic. In scale phase, talent demands clarity, role definition, and fairness. Turnover often signals system strain, so that's not good. In defense phase, talent becomes risk averse. Mobility slows, political behavior increases, exit decisions are cautious. In survival mode, talent either flees or consolidates. Loyalty polarizes. Executives who rely on engagement surveys instead of observing behavior misread the reality. Diagnosis lens 7. How strategy conversations feel. Strategy discussions have an emotional texture. In build phase, strategy feels imaginative and open-ended. In scale phases, it feels analytical and operational. In defense phases, it feels constrained and cautious. In survival phase, it feels blunt and transactional. Executives who feel increasing frustration in strategy sessions often attribute it to politics or incompetence. In many cases, it reflects a phase mismatch. They're pushing for optionality in a system, optimizing for control, or vice versa. Emotion is data. Now, we need to understand the fact that what happens in reality is that obviously the company can be in many different life cycle phases at the same time. Hence, let's discuss the composite diagnosis. Most companies are asynchronous. One of the most important and least discussed truths about life cycles is that different parts of the same organization can be in different phases simultaneously. A core business may be defending while a new product line is in the build phase. One geography may be scaling while another is surviving. Corporate leadership may talk transformation while operations manage risk. This creates confusion for CXOs whose scope cuts across phases. Executives fail not because they misunderstand lifecycle in theory, but because they assume coherence where none exists. Accurate diagnosis requires accepting fragmentation. The most dangerous assumption an aspiring CXO can make is that the organization wants what it says it wants. Organizations often say they want growth, innovation, or transformation when they're structurally incapable of tolerating it. The gap between aspiration and tolerance is where executives get sacrificed. The organization is not lying, it's conflicted. The executives who cannot read that conflict become the casualties of it. Life cycle diagnosis is not just an organizational tool, it's a career survival skill. Executives who can accurately read the company lifecycle phase choose roles more wisely, set expectations more realistically, avoid unwinnable mandates, and time their exits before the credibility collapses. Those who cannot often discover misalignment only after reputational damage has occurred. This is why, before accepting any executive role, aspiring CXOs should be able to answer these questions, not rhetorically, but concretely. Question number one: what phase is the organization actually in? Number two: what phase does the leadership believe it is in? Number three: where do these views diverge? Question number four: who bears the cost of that divergence? If you can't answer these questions, you are accepting uncertainty blindfolded. So imagine this: you are an executive in an organization, let's say small organization, 20 to 30 people, where you have a certain market share out there and you want to protect it. So you're kind of in a defend phase, right? You're thinking you want to protect the market share, you want to protect where you are out there. You have a name, you have products that people love and companies buy, and you're making millions of dollars out of that. So you want to protect it, right? But at the same time, you are noticing that more people want it. Now, they haven't purchased it yet, but they want it, right? So you are thinking, okay, let me scale it up. Or somebody is putting in a larger um, purchase order. So you want to scale your processes up, right? So now you're also in the scale mode. However, you look at your finances and you realize that you cannot really afford to spend too much money. So you are kind of also in a survival mode. And you also have an idea that um, if I want to exist, if I want to get out of the survival mode, I want to diversify. Now I want to create new products and go into different markets that I don't play in yet. Right. So now you're in the build mode as well. So essentially, there are organizations that are all in all four phases. Okay. So this is bad, right? You can be in build phase for specifically this particular product that you're developing. Um, and you can be in the scale mode or phase for this particular portfolio or product that you're scaling at this point in time because there's a lot of demand. And you're in the defense phase for your core products, right? But you're also surviving. So you cannot build if you cannot spend a lot of money on R&D. So If you're in a survival mode, you cannot build. As simple as that. What are you going to do instead? You are going to tell your R&D to build anyway. Now, right. So they're building with whatever they can find. They can't buy new equipment. They can't buy new expensive ingredients. So they're just building something. And because you're in build mode and survive mode, your decision velocity is very high. So you're like, okay, I got to hurry up and launch this thing. Before you launch it, you need to scale it. So now you are very fast. You have a prototype that's so raw, and it's not even working properly. It's not functioning. It's just been born. It's a baby, and you have it, and now you want to scale it right away. Let's scale it because you want to launch it as fast as possible so you can make money out of it. And when you make money out of that, now you can get out of the survival mode, right? So a mistake, because when you push things too quickly into the scale phase, you risk your product not having the right quality that it needs, or you risk the scale up not going well and getting pushed back into the build phase, back to the drawing board. In the meantime, you lose money, you lose time, which obviously time is money. So you lose just overall. You can lose years doing that, right? It's better to stay in as few phases as possible so you can concentrate, okay? Concentrate your effort on it. If you can spend any money whatsoever and you know that to get out of the survival mode, you need to build, put it on R&D. Give that money to R&D. So, but if you cannot, absolutely cannot, then you cannot really ask your R&D to build products, right? And launch it, to scale it and so on and so forth. You need to kind of stay in the survival mode and at the same time defend mode to defend what you already have, right? So, um, obviously, if you do need money, you need to go and get it from the bank or investors or something like that. So this is where the capable executives go get the money, invest the money into the phases that are absolutely necessary. Before you can even do that, though, you need to understand what phases you're in, right? If you're not in one phase, you need to dissect everything and understand which product is in which phase and how to handle it, right? But overarchingly, what you need is funds, right? So that's that's basically what you need in order to survive, uh, build, scale, and sometimes even defend. All the educational episodes of the show can be found in a book I recently published called C-Suite Bible: How Executive Careers Are Won, Lost, and Survived. This book should be all you need to succeed in C-Suite. The book can be purchased on Amazon, and the link can be found on in the website www.csuitebible.com, CSUITEBIBLE.com. Thank you for watching the fifth episode of the show. Until next time.